Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel Learn at Cloud Analytics. So I hope everyone is doing good and I'm excited to continue on the series of Power BI Zero to Hero. So today we are going to cover the data transformations in Power BI. So we already understood the entire development process that would happen, like the various stages that we have in Power BI. And as part of that, we've got introduced to the data connections, how we can establish the different ways of connecting in Power BI desktop. So today we are going to continue to that topic where we would be getting introduced to the data transformations that can be conducted within Power BI desktop, and then we will try to explore the other basic transformations that can be applied on our data set. So with that said, let's get started. So if you're someone who is watching these videos for the first time, who's exploring my content on my channel, and if you're liking my content, please do support me by giving a thumbs up and also trying to subscribe to my channel, so that way it would help me to promote this channel to a wider users who can who would be able to benefit from this. And go into the basic transformations, we need to understand where are these data transformations are even been allowed to perform. So the data transformations are or can be happened only by using the Power Query editor. So within Power BI desktop, we use the Power Query editor to perform any sort of a data transformations that is needed on our data set. So how do we access to the Power Query editor to make the data transformations? So there are few ways of doing this. The first way is that at the very beginning, when you make the data connections to the respective data source, you would be allowed to select either load data or transform data within the navigator window. So from there you can just select transform data and just directly access to the Power Query editor window. But let's say that you've already imported the data and now you would like to make some data transformations. So how do you go back to that same window? So after you import or after you have connected to the data source, and if you'd like to make some data transformations, from the home ribbon, right, within the home tab, there is an option called transform data within the queries pane. Now here we need to select the transform data and click on transform data. And when we select the transform data option, that would open up a new window separately called as a untitled Power Query editor. And this is the one which we are going to use for making any sort of a data transformations. And like I said, this particular Power Query editor is an inbuilt ETL tool for Power BI desktop, where we are actually trying to extract, transform and load the data. So we will be seeing all three of them. So what are we trying to extract? We've already extracted the data coming in from different tables, as you see it on my queries pane, right? So within your queries pane, you already see all the different tables listed here. Now after we've extracted, we are trying to make some transformations, and that's where we are going to learn in the next few minutes. Now let's try to understand how this particular window is looking like and what are the different options that we are supposed to be aware of. So I will go back to my So what I did is I tried to highlight the important sections of this particular window so that it's easier for you to understand. So the first top highlighted section is the red color area is nothing but the toolbar or the ribbon. So this particular section is trying to help us perform all sort of a data transformation. So it has all the query editing tools available as a direct feature from the product side. So you don't need to write any code. So there is no code required, or you don't need to do some complex steps or some complex processes involved in this process. All that you have to do is identify what step are you trying to perform, what transformation you need to apply on your data set, and then you just need to go and select that option on this ribbon, on this toolbar, and you are done with that. So the moment you select that particular step or that particular feature, that step has been applied on your data set. We will see that. So the first highlighted section that is titled as number 1, 1 is nothing but this is my toolbar or the ribbon from your Power Query editor view. Then comes the second section. So you see on the left side, which is called as a queries pane, right? So this queries pane contains the list of all the tables and queries that we have connected to. Alright, so in the current example that you're working with, I have already connected to 3 different tables. One is connections, and then we have connected to customer table from Postgres database, and the third one is the orders table coming in from my Excel workbook. So those are my 3 different tables that I have already extracted and have been listed under my queries pane. Okay, so queries pane is basically providing you the list of all the tables or queries that you have within your Power BI, and then followed by the next section, which is labeled as 3. So this is called as your formula bar. So this formula bar contains the M code. So if you observe carefully, there is some code, or there is some language used to make some transformations being applied on your data set, and that language is nothing but your M language. Okay, so all the steps that you are performing by making use of this number 1 section, right, all the steps that you see, like for example, if you're trying to remove some rows or columns, you're not writing any code internally, right? Rather, you're just going and clicking on that particular feature, and once you click on that particular feature, the step has been applied, like that particular feature has been applied. So if you were trying to remove certain columns, right, so immediately that action has been applied on your data set. And how it is trying to implement that action? By writing internally an M code for that particular step, because Power BI can only understand that M language, through which it will try to make that results happen as required. Okay, so number 3 is your formula bar, where you can also make your own custom M code as needed, but if required, you can just monitor for all the steps that you're performing with respect to data transformations and understand how those codes are being updated. So below 3 we have the 4. So the next section is nothing but the data preview pane. So this data preview is nothing but for the selected table on the queries pane, whatever table that you might select, you can see the data preview within this section 4, which is your data preview pane, so that you know what are your rows and columns, how are they looking like, and based on which you are making some decision for data transformation. Okay, and then we have the 5th section, which is your query settings. So the query settings ideally contains your table name and the properties associated to that particular table. So let's say that whenever you try to connect to some table in Power BI, right, the table name might not be user friendly. You might need to rename the table so it is understood for someone who is trying to recreate, or maybe who is trying to relook at that particular connections, right? So you always try to give a meaningful names to your tables and the queries that you might use within your reporting, and that's where you can just create a rename of your tables using this particular query settings name. Below this 5th section we have the 6th section, which is your applied steps. So whatever data transformations that you are trying to apply on your data set, all those steps are being captured within your applied steps, so that at any point in time in future, if you would like to relook at your previous transformation steps, you can always go through the applied steps section and see all the steps that are listed in sequence. So let's say that maybe you have done some changes to your data set, like where you have tried to remove some columns, where you have tried to add some additional new rows or columns. So you will be able to see all those changes or all those transformations being captured as a new step within the applied steps section. Okay, So it basically lists all the steps that you have performed with respect to the data transformation. So these are the different components of your Power Query editor. So we have 6 different components mainly, and we will be looking through all of them in detail now. Now that we've understood all these topics together, right, let me quickly go back to my Power Query editor. So this is my Power Query editor, and let's explore what is existing within my home ribbon on this particular editor window. Alright, so as you see, I have an option to connect to a new source. So let's say that along with my 3 different tables that I've already connected to, in case if I would like to bring in some new table or a new connection, you can just come to this home ribbon, click on this new source and select the corresponding data source and bring into Power Query editor directly. The second option that you can also see here is these are all your recent sources. Like let's say that if you would like to connect to some previously connected data sources, right, you can always come to this recent sources where it will show you all the list of connections that you have established earlier and be able to make the connections easily. And then you are also allowed to create data directly on your Power Query editor. So this option is also there on your Power BI desktop, while it is also available on your Power Query editor. So in case if you would like to do some ad hoc analysis, right, so you can simply create some test data by using this enter data, and you can just create your own rows and like your own columns and records to that columns and give a name to that particular data set, and then you would be allowed to make some analysis that is required. And then we have the other option called data source settings. So what are these data source settings? So when I select my data source settings, right, it just gives me the list of all my connections which are currently existing on my Power Query editor, and also the complete details about my connections. So you see that these are my data sources in my current file, and if required you can also change the source, or you can just export it and clear the permissions or edit the permissions. So let's say that this is my data source, right? If I say that I'd like to edit my permissions, so you can come back and modify some permissions here as needed. So there are some options, so we will go through it. And then we have the parameters. So we will understand it, what are parameters and all, but for now just understand that we have this option of creating a new parameter within your Power Query editor window. And we have a couple of other more options. So for me, what are the important elements that I would be interested in is, one is my how to bring in some new sources directly into your Power Query editor, this new source option. And I would also be interested in the advanced editor window, because in the advanced editor I can actually see all the steps and all the connections and everything being summarized in a M code language. So this is actually the M language in which I can try to understand what has happened till date with respect to that particular connection. So you could see that I've tried to connect to a source called Excel workbook. So that is my data source type. And where is it coming in from? So this is my path from where I have copied this data source, and what is the table that I've connected to, and what are the changes that I've performed, or all the data transformations that I've applied on top of that. So you can see all of those changes and all of those steps being captured in detail. So advanced editor is a very important section that we will be using along, and which would also help us in many other ways. And other option that I would be interested in is the choose columns. So at most of the times whenever we try to connect to any data source in real time, right, we would be left with multiple columns. So there would be like in tens of columns where not all of them are quite important for a reporting purpose. So for our reporting purpose we might be only interested in using, let's say, hardly 6 to 10 columns, but not all of them, right? So what we can do is we can just come to this choose columns option, select choose columns within that option, and then you can just select whatever columns is needed for your analysis. You can just bring in the right data that is needed for your reporting and unselect the unwanted columns. In this way, you're actually trying to concise the data set volume and also try to improve the overall performance of your report further as you go and develop. Okay. So that's about the choose column. So you can just select whichever columns is needed. You can just load that particular required columns alone by avoiding the unnecessary columns being loaded into Power BI. Other option is go to column. So like I said, if you have too many columns, it's hard for you to just scroll through the list of columns and find where that column is actually existing, right? So instead of scrolling through the list of columns to identify, you can just come to this choose columns option, select the go to column, and here you can just type in for that column name. So let's say if I'm interested in looking at segment, I'll just type the segment, select it, and when I click on OK, it will actually go and highlight that particular column. So it's helping me to find where this column is within this particular table, and it will also highlight that particular column, so I know that okay, this is my column where I'm trying to look for. And then we have this remove column. So let's say if I'm not interested in all the columns, I can just remove the unwanted columns directly. So the other option that we saw earlier is choose column. So you have the data as it is. So at any point in later stages, if you'd like to bring in some additional columns which were not been loaded earlier, you can always come and load that, select that particular column and reload the data and populate it within your data set if you're avoiding it by making use of the choose columns option. But if you remove it explicitly, it's kind of permanent deletion, and at later point of development phase, if you'd like to have a new column which has been removed previously, you will not be able to bring back those columns again. So again, you will have to reload the data, like you will have to make a fresh connection, go through all the data transformation steps, and then you will have to bring in that column again. So which is a painful. So it is always recommended that instead of you going through the remove column options, you can just go to the choose columns and wisely select whatever columns are needed. You just select them, bring in the data, build the report as needed, and at future places where some new columns needs to be introduced, you can come back to the Power Query editor, go to the choose columns and unselect or select that particular column as needed. And then we have the keep rows and the remove rows columns, where you can just select whichever rows and columns rows is needed. You can just select them, and if you are interested in removing some particular rows, you can also come to this remove rows and remove them as well. So there are different options, like you can split the column, you can do a group by as similar to that of SQL, where you can do some aggregations of data, and you can also see the data type of that respective column. So you see, one of the important data transformation steps that we would need to be focusing on is the type conversion. So at times your original data might not be loaded as it is with the right data type, so you might need to look through the data types that are identified in Power BI Desktop and make sure that they are in the right format, like in the right data type identified. But if it's in a wrong data type, then you might need to change the data type to the right one. So there are different ways again. So the easiest way that I would usually use is that let's say that this one, right? So I'll just click on this ABC, the notations that you see next to the column names, right? These are nothing but your data type of that particular column. So in case if I like to change this data type from string to or text to something else, you can just click on that ABC, and that would show you the list of all the possible data types or the supported data types from Power BI, and you can just change it accordingly. Or you can also select that particular column and come to this home ribbon and data type, and select the drop down and select whichever is the appropriate one for that column. So that's another way of handling with the wrong data types for the columns. And then we have the use first row as headers. So this is again another one. So sometimes when you try to connect your data set, right, the first row is not identified properly. So maybe the headers that you see here, right, these might go into the row 1, and you might need to push that to be called as a column headers. So for that you can just simply select this use first as headers, and that will automatically be updated, or the first row has been treated as the headers. And then we have the merge queries, append queries. So we will see this in the next sessions. And if I go to the transform ribbon, right, on the transform tab, there are different options, like again we can transform the data, we can reverse the rows, you see, and sorry, I'm just removing that particular step. We can also do a count of rows, like how many rows we have. So you see there are total of 10,194 rows in this entire table of orders table. So, and likewise you have other options as well, like how, if in case if you'd like to replace certain values with some other value, right, you can come to this replace value and you can transform it. And if you'd like to unpivot or pivot a column, you can do that. Or if you'd like to fill the data by some value, right, you can do this fill up or down. And you can also do the move to make sure that that particular column has been moved either left or right, and wherever that you'd like to place that. So these are all applied at the column level. So as you could see, this is at any column. So as a best practice, I would strongly encourage you to, instead of performing the transformations directly by through this particular transform pane, I would suggest that you go to the add column tab, and then you perform the transformations, because then it would actually add that transformation. Like let's say if you'd like to create a new column, or maybe if you'd like to split a column, I would suggest to do that as a new column, because if you do that on the original existing column, the data might be disturbed, right? Because if you'd like to re-go, then it will again have to be a re-step of going through the previous step and understanding which column is that. But if you do this using the add column, that would be more beneficial. So I would encourage you to use this add column option. And then we have the view. So the view tab is actually helping us to understand the data profile of this particular data set. So let's say that if I like to see the column quality, I can just select this option, column quality, and it would show me the quality of my individual columns. So you could see that there are different categories of how it is labeling the data by valid data, errors, if there are any errors in my column, or if there are any empty records in my column. So I can see based on the percentages being listed if there is any need for performing any data cleansing or data transformations. So that is one way of checking the quality of my column. And the other one is, what is my column profile? Now let's say that whatever that we see individually, right, but sometimes we might be interested to look at in a nutshell what is the total column profile, right? So how many errors are there, and how many distinct values are there, or how many unique values are there in that column. So if there are any NANs, or if there are any what is the zero values, or what is the standard deviation of that, and what is average. So you could see all the statistics for that particular column separately. And then we also have the column distribution. So when we select the column distribution, you can actually see through a visual representation how many distinct and how many unique values are existing in that particular column. So since here the row ID is being treated as a primary key, you could see that all the 1,000 records are distinct and also unique. So that's why it is qualified to be a primary key. And where it comes to order ID, you see that there are only 482 distinct values while 221 are unique. So you already know the percent differences between or the column distribution of all the respective columns here, based on which you are able to make some decision on where the data transformation needs to be focused on. Alright, so these are some important options that are available within your basic data transformation steps. Now let's try to apply some data transformations. So let me quickly do some basic transformations. um, Let me try to remove some I'm not interested to have all the columns. So you see there are like 21 columns. So how do you know that there are 21 columns? On the left column, right on the left bottom corner, you could see that there are 21 columns being listed. And currently the data preview has been shown only for up to the top 1000 rows. While there are 10,000 records in my entire dataset, it's only showing me the top 1000 rows record because it can't just load everything as it is, right? So that's the reason. Now let us try to make some basic transformations. Let's say that I don't want to have all the columns. So what would I do? I just go to the choose columns and select choose columns, and now I'll just unselect everything, and now I will manually select one by one. So I'll say I need the row ID. I also need the order ID, order date, and customer name, customer ID. Let's say country, city, segment, region, category, subcategory, and sales. Okay. So these are few columns which I'm interested in having. So I'll just selected all of them, and let me just hit on OK. Now you could see that the column count has been changed from 22 or 21 to 13 columns because I've unselected the other columns, and now I only have my required columns being listed. Okay, now what do I like to do? Okay, so now I have my order ID here, right? So order ID, as you could notice, the order ID format is like I have my region, my location, like which is US, so it has some and then followed by hyphen, and then I have the year in which year this order has been placed, and followed by the ID of that particular respective order. So this is how I have all the details within my order ID. And likewise, if I come, okay, let's try to split this particular customer name to have first name and last name being separated. So how do I do that? So I'd like to have this as a separate column. So I'm going to the add column tab, and I would try to say, okay, add a column, or maybe first I'll show you the direct way of doing things. So I'll just say and split column. So I'm trying to split this particular column by the delimiter. So I'll select by delimiter, and what is my delimiter? It's a space, and I'm saying for each occurrence of the delimiter. So I'll just click on OK. Now you could see that this particular column has been split into 3 different columns: customer name 1, 2 and 3. So 3, I'm not sure what do I have. Okay, I do have something. So which means that it is actually dividing into first name, middle name and last name. So I don't want these 3. Instead I'll just remove the last step from my applied step, and again I'll select my customer name, and I'll go back to my split column by delimiter, and now I would just select by space but split at rightmost delimiter. Okay, and now I'll hit on OK. Now you could notice that I only have customer name 1 and customer name 2, right? So which is ideally splitting into 2 separate columns. So this I can rename it as first name, and this as my last name. So while we are making this transformation step, you could observe that within the applied steps section, there are few changes been noticed. So this is my recent step where it has changed type 1. And if I go back to my previous step, you can notice that it has actually split the columns into two. And if I go to the previous step, you can also notice that I have removed the unwanted columns, right? So all the transformations that I am trying to apply are being captured in sequence as a step within my applied steps, and it is also allowing me to traverse through the steps to see and understand what changes did I actually apply from the beginning. Okay, so that is the benefit of having this applied steps section on this Power Query Editor window, through which I am able to understand uh, how many steps did I even apply and what are those data transformations that have been applied on my data set. Alright, now let's try to rename this columns as first name and last name. Okay, so we have a first name and last name columns, and now we will go and see for any other changes. I'm just trying to see what else can be done. Okay, let's say that I'll go to the date column. Okay, so here we have the order date, which has also been identified as my date column data type, right? So you see that there is this calendar icon. So calendar icon denotes that it is a date data type. So because all the values that are stored in this column are been stored as a date format, that is why the data type has been identified as a date data type. Now what I'm interested to do here on my order date is, let's say that I'll go to my add column. Now I'd like to add this as a separate column, so I just went to the add column tab and I'm going to this date feature or the date option, and I'd like to extract the year from this particular column. So I'm just selecting year and year. Okay, so you notice that this column has now been separated and we have it. Now if I'd like to keep it next to each other, I can just bring it drag and drop. So I'm just trying to drag and drop and putting that next to this particular column. So I have both of them arranged next to each other. Now I'm also interested in knowing what is my day of week. Okay, so which day of the week is the date falling in? Okay, so this is day 4, day 5, or whatever the day of the week, right? So that has also been extracted. So you see that it's quite simple for us to analyze the data, or make some data transformations, where I'm just selecting that particular column and going through that particular feature and trying to bring in the right data extracted. And maybe I'm also trying to understand maybe name of day, on which day did that order happen actually. So it's saying, okay, it's on Thursday, Friday, or Saturday, or Sunday. What is the weekday that is falling on that particular date, right? So I'm able to know like on which days did my orders happen the highest, or when was it lowest. So I'm interested to analyze in that way, and that's why I've extracted it already in my transformation step. So now I have all my days extracted, and I have my years extracted, and I also have the day of week. Now at any point, if you'd like to remove any columns, like I said, it's very simple. You can just select the column, right click, and you can select remove. The other option which says remove other columns will just remove the other columns by keeping this particular selected column. So you'll need to make sure that you select whatever is appropriate for your requirement. Okay, so all you have to do is right click on that particular column and select remove, and that would remove that column from the data set. Okay, so this is how you can make some basic transformations. let's try to do any other transformation. So I'm trying to see what else should we be doing in. Okay, let's try to do some grouping of the data. It's okay, anyways we will be covering this in deep as we go along, but just to for the time being, let's try to evaluate what does this group by does, right? So the moment I've selected group by, it has given me a window which has both the options of basic and advanced. In the basic, which is my default selection, I can select which column I would like to perform the group by. Let's say if I'm interested to group by the data based on my year, so I'll just select the year and I'll call this as aggregated sales. Okay, and operation is sum of sales. Now let's see what would happen. So now you could see that with respect to my year, I've got my aggregated sales value. So what is my total sales for each and every year that I have within my data set? That's exactly what I'm trying to achieve by making use of my group by, right? So it's similar to that of our SQL queries where we use the group by functionality to aggregate the data as needed based on certain columns, right? So similarly here, for this example, I try to aggregate my sales with respect to the year. Now if I'd like to modify this condition, right, within my applied step, you need not remove the step, but rather you can modify it. So you see there is a small gear icon represented next to that particular group rows step. Click on that gear icon, or which is the settings, and this will all again open up the same window where you have created this condition, and now you can actually re-update this condition by changing it as needed. Now instead of selecting here, I would like to, or maybe I'll go with the advanced this time. I'd like to group by based on my year, but also based on let's say region. So for every region and for every year, I would like to see the total aggregated sales value. Now let me hit on OK. Now you could notice that for every region, so you see that, let me do one thing. I'll do it first year, region and year. Okay, now you could see that for all the regions there are with respect to my region and year, I have my aggregated sales. So for 2019 central region, my total sales is 3,838. So these are my total sales aggregated with respect to my both region and the year column. So in this way you are able to make some transformations, some aggregations in fact, by grouping those different columns together and be able to present the data as needed. So all of these changes are just done by just a click of that particular function, and you don't need to write explicitly any logic. But if you notice here in the formula bar, right, for this particular step what it actually has written is table.group. So where is it trying to group the data? At the table level. That's why it is saying table.group, and within the parenthesis it is actually writing the code where it's saying it is displaying the removed column step. So this is my output data, right? So it is displaying that column name or that step name as removed columns, as you could see here. On top of this removed columns step, which is my previous step, we are trying to group the data based on my region and year, and we are trying to display the sales, which is named as a column called aggregated sales, within each value in that particular sales value listed. So this is the M language that it has generated on its own. So we didn't write this complex code on our own, but rather Power BI has helped us to write that logic internally and get the right results being projected on the data set. So this is how the M code has been or how Power BI is able to display the right results based on all the transformations that we are making on this data set, and we are able to see the results in the output. Now let me go back to our course. So we've spoke about the data connections in Power BI. We also went through the query editor, which is nothing but your Power Query editor interface. We understood what are the different components that are part of your query editor and what are the basic data transformations in Power BI. So we've also covered that. Now let's go with the text specific transformations. What are the different text specific transformations that are available? So where do you see the text specific transformations in this entire Power Query editor? So I'm just going back. For the text specific transformations, you could see that so text is nothing but, again, it's a string data type, right? So text specific means for all the string based columns, what are the different options that is available and how are we able to apply the data transformation. So for text specific in the sense, let me go back, like I'll just remove this column so that I can see some additional data. Okay, so this is my text column, right? Now what are the different transformations that I can apply on this column? So you could see by selecting that particular column, there are few options that have been highlighted and some of them are grayed out. So all the ones that are highlighted or enabled means that these transformations are entitled to apply on this particular column. Because it's a text column, you can see that we are able to select the transpose, which is like treating your rows as columns and vice versa. And we can also rename the column and we can replace the values, which is quite important, right? So at times we might have some incorrect values being presented within your column and you might need to replace or update that value so that it is corrected as needed. And we can also do the pivoting and unpivoting of the columns, and we can just move left and right. So I'll just say left, and this column comes to the left of that particular column. And then we have the split column, which we've already seen. So if I would like to split the column based on delimiter, where we can just specify how the column should be split, we can select it. Or we can also split the column by number of characters. So if I select it, I can just say maybe by 3 characters. So for every 3 characters I would like to split that particular column, so I can just specify that count. Or I can also do it by the position, so where is it residing. So for every second position, so second position means like I'll just show you. So for every second position means Friday, right? So in Friday, FR, so FR is 1 2. After every second position, it has split that particular column. And then we have other option called by lowercase to uppercase. So you can just split the column based on lowercase to uppercase or uppercase to lowercase, or by digit to non-digit and vice versa. And you can also do some formatting. So let's say that I would like to convert this values from lowercase to uppercase. I can just select uppercase, so it would just transform everything to uppercase. Or if you'd like to convert everything to lowercase, you can just select lowercase. Or if you'd like to capitalize each word, you can just select that option. Or if you would like to trim the column, so if there are any unwanted spaces within the column, right, you can use the trim option. So you can just select that trim, and that would remove any spaces like unwanted spaces from that particular column, and you can clean the data to remove any characters like non-printable characters. And you can also add some prefix and suffix. So I will show you like where exactly is it helpful. So I'm just removing all these steps, and you could notice that all the transformations that we have applied, right, all have been captured within the applied steps section. Okay, now add prefix and suffix. So where do we actually add the prefix and suffix? So for example, if I go to my sales value, right? So I'll just go to the format and I'll add a prefix saying for every value I'd like to add the currency value. So I could see that for in front of that value there is a dollar symbol added next to that. So in this way you can do some custom transformations as needed, and you can also add some suffix, right? And you have the extract option where we can try to extract based on a specific length. So let's say that if I would like to extract from category, if I would like to extract the length, it just extracts it. So it just calculated what is the length of that particular category column. So it just calculates how many characters are there. So let's say that for paper there are like how many characters, 1 2 3 4 5. So it would give me 5 as the value in the output. So that is how it is calculating the length of my text. And if I would like to extract the first characters, right? So you can just select it. So if you would like to extract, like if you would like to get a subset of this particular column value, right, you can just go through this extract options, and based on your conditions we can just select that and extract the required output in the column. And we also have the parse. So we will see that, probably it's little advanced, but so there are different options of how you can just go and do the things. So mainly you deal with the formatting and the extract options for the text columns most probably, and the options does vary for other options as well. Next, let's see, we have the number specific tools. So for number specific, so what are the different options for number specific? So let's say, okay, so profit is identified as number, right, because of the data type in 1.2. Sales is also one, but since I've added a prefix, so now it got to number format. So if you just select it, right, 1.2 is nothing but decimal number, so it's actually a number format column, number data type. So if I select sales column, right, you could see that the number specific tools have been highlighted. So this is from number, and this is from text. So text is related to the text columns, while the number transformations are applied for the number columns. So here you can just go and apply some standard operations, like you can do some addition, multiply, subtraction, division, modulo, percentage, and percentage of. So you can just do as needed. So if you say add, so you're just adding the number to that particular row in that particular column. So for every row in that column you are just adding certain values. So let's say I'd like to add number 10. So 10 has been added to each and every value in that column, you see. So this is my original sales column, which is 16.448, and since I've added with 10, it has become 26.448. So likewise for every other records in that column, value 10 has been added up, and you're seeing that output as the resultant. And likewise you have the other operators, like the operations that can be performed. So you can also multiply, subtract, divide. So and we can also do some scientific calculations, like you can get the absolute value, or you can calculate what is the square of that particular value, or cube of that value, or power of that value, and square root, exponent, logarithm, based on both base 10 and natural logarithm value. And we can also calculate the factorial of that particular column as well. And we also have the trigonometric functions, which are like the sine, cosine, tangent, arcsine, and arccosine and arctangent. So if there is a requirement to perform any trigonometric operations, you can just come to this number tools and you select the trigonometry and apply that. We can also do the rounding off. So here you could see that this particular sales column has like after decimal there are like 3 places, right? Now if you'd like to round, right, you can just select round up. Now when you say round up, you could see that it is rounding to the nearest integer, to the next rounding up. But if you select round down, it is going to the previous value. So plus or minus, right? So in which way you would like to round the value, based on which the rounding can happen. But if you just select round, you need to specify by how many places you would like to round off the value. So let's say I just wanted to round off by 0. So you could see that it has just rounded off to the nearest value with 0 decimals. And you also have the information to find whether that given number is a even number or a odd number. So you can just select that column and select is even or odd, and then it will display whether it's a even number or a odd number by giving it as a true or false. So I'll say is even. So whenever you see is in front of any function, right, that would be treated as a boolean expression or a boolean function. So the output is always either a true or a false value. So based on which you are able to make a decision like whether the condition is met or not. So yeah, so those are the different number tools that are available within your data transformations. And similarly for the date specific tools, we have let me go back to the date, order date. Yeah, so this is my order date. So if I select my order date column, which is my date data type, you can see that the date tools have been highlighted. So we've already explored it earlier. So if you go to the date, if you just select this drop down, you can just evaluate what is the age of that particular date, and maybe you can extract the year or month or quarter, week, day, and there are different ways of how you extract the data as well. So you can get the required values being extracted. And likewise, if that column is a date and a time based data type, then these time and duration tools would also be enabled. But right now it's just a date column, so date data type, therefore only the date tool has been highlighted. I'm not focusing much on those examples because they are pretty much very simple and easy to understand, so I hope it's clear enough. But in case if you are still not aware of, or if you're not able to follow any specific tools within the explained ones, please feel free to leave a comment so that I would be able to cover that in my next session. And then comes the advanced transformation. So this has also been covered, where we went through the grouping and aggregating data, right? So we've explored that group by functionality, where we've tried to aggregate the data by the year and with respect to my sales. So we saw that already, right? So that's also been explained. And then we have the pivoting and unpivoting data. So what is the pivoting and unpivoting? So if I go to this transform data, right, we have this option called pivot and unpivot column. So what is exactly happening here? So when we say pivot, pivot is nothing but if you'd like to transform. So let's say, okay, let me select pivot. Okay, based on the values column, I'll just select here, okay, and I'm hitting on OK. So for every year, see, all the days have been split. So we've got like Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, because I've selected that column previously, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So for all the years, the data has been split from rows to columns since I've selected pivot columns. Now if I do an unpivot column, it is just trying to convert the columns into rows. So you see that attribute column has been created with the value, where the attribute column has Sunday and value as 29 because I've not selected everything, right? So if I've selected, let's say, I'm just selecting all these multiple columns of my weekdays, and now I'm trying to do a unpivot column. Now what happens is, the moment I've selected all the weekdays and selected unpivot columns, it just transformed my multiple columns data into a row level data. So from columns to rows, it has converted the transformation, and it has created two new columns with the name as attribute and value. Attribute is nothing but it is having all the values taken from the individual columns, input it across the rows, and the values are the values against to that particular columns. So earlier we had the column value as here, right? Because when I've created the pivot in the previous step, I've selected based on my year, and that has become the value for each and every column. And in the same way, now since I've selected the same columns to unpivot, it has taken the same values and displayed it within my value column. So that's about the pivoting and unpivoting of column. It's very simple. You can also do that quite easily. I would strongly encourage you to please go ahead and try that out. And then we have the merge and append queries. I would like to stop here, because merge and append queries are other important concept where I would like to go with an example in detail and explain you all the different types of merge and append query possibilities. So merge is nothing but when if I have to compare it with respect to SQL, it's like the join conditions. So we have four different conditions in join, right? Like left, right, and inner and outer. So we will see everything in detail when we cover that topic in the next session. But just to give a recap of what we have explained till now. So we went through the introduction of data connections in Power BI. We understood the overall of how this uh, the development process would happen. So we have understood how the data has been connected within Power BI desktop. What are the ways of connecting the data in Power BI desktop, either by import or a direct query mode? What are the differences between both of them? And then we also try to understand the data transformation stage, where we've covered topics from the basics of uh, understanding what is the query editor components that we have, the important components of Power Query Editor, and then we went through the basic data transformations that can be applied, and we went through the specific tools of for data transformations like text specific transformation, number specific tools, date specific, and within the advanced transformations we understood the grouping and aggregating data, and also the pivoting and unpivoting data. So for all of these data transformations, we need to first select that corresponding column. So if it's a number data type, we need to select that column, and because it's a number data type, we would have the number tools been highlighted. But if I select any text based data type, you could see that the text column tools have been highlighted. So based on the respective column data type, the data transformation tools options would also be varied. So you need to first select that column, and then you need to explore that options of what data transformation that we are interested in applying. And all of these data transformations, whatever that we are trying to apply on the original data set, all those steps have been captured in sequential order within the applied steps section. So I'm stopping here for today. So in the next section, we will be continuing from the merge and append queries, and we will go with the data modeling introduction as well. So I hope this topic is clear enough and you've been able to follow along the topics. And in case if you have any queries, or if something is still not clear enough, I would ask you to please do post your comment queries on the comment box, and I would be happy to assist you on that query answering. And please do support my channel by leaving a like and share, and do subscribe as I do see that most of you are just visiting my channel but you have not subscribed yet. So if you do like my content that I'm publishing it on my YouTube channel, and if you like to encourage me, please do support by subscribing it. And I will just leave it for today, and we will continue from the next topic in the next session. Thank you.